So recently there was a small controversy in the Marvel Rivals community. You may have heard of it. Uh, and I wanted to talk about not it exactly, but it did inspire me to create a video. Not just because it is a very popular topic currently, and I am most certainly trying to ride that wave a little bit and hoping to expand my audience a little bit because I would like some more viewership on this channel, but also like basically everything else I talk about on this channel because I feel that it has some kind of personal connection or personal meaning for me. And also because I think that the situation says something greater about our society, or that I think there's something to be learned from it if people are willing to sort of look at it and to glean something from it. So I wanted to talk about it a little bit. So I'll start by just giving a very simplified crash course on this. If you want the details, you can find that on a million other channels. But basically, there was a tournament for Marvel Rivals, which is a team-based competitive hero shooter. And there was $40,000 on the line for the winning team. And one team had a bit of a disagreement. Okay, these are all very high levels, maybe even top level players in their respective characters or roles. And one player in particular decided that she was going to play a bit of an infamous character, Black Widow, who is a sniper and is infamous for having a very high skill floor and very high skill ceiling, and generally not necessarily considered good in a lot of matchups, a lot of team comps, but can be powerful, no doubt about that. And this player is, by all accounts, a decent Black Widow player, also no doubt. But did not start off strong in the tournament, and so another player recognized A, they were not starting off strong, and B, even if they did well, it's very easy to counter Black Widow, right? It's very easy for the other team to adjust, to counter it, and to shut her down completely, okay? And so he suggested, respectfully, politely, like, look, we got to win this. We want to win this. I want to win this. I need that money. Can you switch? Can you play this team-based game as a team? Can we do something different? She responded almost basically word for word as no and fuck you, shut the fuck up. And her whole, the entire team sort of turned on this guy, and he was eventually kicked off the team, kicked out of the tournament, and there's a whole bunch of shitstorm that blew up after that. End result is this guy is now sort of a hero of the community now that all the facts are out. And this girl and everyone else who agreed with her and took her side, they're being run off the internet, right? So in my opinion, justice has been served, okay? The court of public opinion has done its job, and things have sort of ended well. But the incident itself, and in particular, the facts that this guy was correct and pointed that out, because that team did lose. Once he was gone, they did lose. They came in second to last place. She continued to play Black Widow, and what happened was exactly what he predicted. The enemy team countered that, shut her down. They didn't have a chance. Okay, not that she was the only person that mattered in that team, but his prediction was correct. They lost. Okay, so the fact that he was correct and that he pointed that out and that he just tried to politely and democratically, cooperatively say, let's play as a team here, that failed, and he was not just ignored, but punished for it, that resonated with me. I have a lot of personal experience with this same kind of thing. And also, I am a Marvel Rivals player, right? I've been playing Marvel Rivals since it came out. I was in the beta. I played up until season 2, and then I sort of bounced off the game because admittedly the game itself is very toxic for basically this reason. I came back this last season and worked my way through bronze into diamond in about a month because I had never played comp before, so I just placed low. And I did that mostly by myself because in my experience, it is very difficult to find people who are both good at the game and cooperative. It's usually one or the other, right? It's very difficult to find both. And the matchmaking is obviously sort of rigged against you. That's a whole nother topic. So I have some personal experience recently, fresh, dealing with this kind of toxicity. And again, that resonated with me, that I felt his pain in that moment as a Marvel Rivals player. And that's at mid-level, right? Well, I'm talking about, through bronze through diamond, right? You get that kind of shit where people at a low level don't have the game sense to recognize what I'm doing isn't working. And then as you start to get into the mid-levels and the upper levels, and by the time you get to where he was, it's pure ego. It's just ego. It's just people want to see their name at the top of the leaderboard. They want to prove that they're the best, right? They don't really care about the team or winning or anyone else or anything else. They just want to be the best. And to me, it never fails to astound me that you see that same behavior at every level of gameplay, right? But again, this resonated with me because even in my personal life and my professional life, I feel like I deal with this kind of thing all the time. The curse of being correct. It doesn't matter how much you try to be nice or considerate or polite or professional about something. The reality of the situation is that if someone is wrong and they just want to be wrong because they think that they're right or they don't care, you can't ever win that situation, right? The only winning move literally is not to play. The only winning move in that situation is to not contest them, to let them do what they want to do. Because as soon as you are an obstacle in your way, you are the adversary. You are a problem to them. And unfortunately, in my experience, I have also found that more often than not, the person standing in the way of that, even though you are correct for doing it, for saying, hey, that's not right, for standing up for what is right, for trying to do the right thing, you are the one who gets shit for it. You are the one who gets in trouble. You are the one who takes the heat simply because you're seen as a troublemaker. People would rather someone do the wrong thing because it somehow creates less trouble. I don't really understand the logistics here. And I don't think the logistics actually work this way. It's purely a perception thing. But the perception is that someone doing the wrong thing creates less trouble than someone standing up and pointing out and saying, hey, you're doing the wrong thing, right? And so when someone does that, like he did in this case, and like I've done in my personal life, and like I'm sure many people do all the time, all over the place, those are the people who get shot down and who get punished for trying to do the right thing. I mean, the classic example you see repeated all the time on the internet is a kid in school is getting bullied all the time and they go to the teacher and the bullies are never punished, right? But as soon as the kid stands up for themselves, now suddenly the kid who was getting bullied, now they're the troublemaker. Now they're getting in trouble. Now they're getting punished. They're getting suspended for fighting back, right? And again, I have personal experience with exactly that case. I was bullied for most of my life. And then eventually when I decided that I wasn't going to take shit anymore, I was going to fight back and I was going to be the asshole, right? I was going to be the troublemaker. Now I'm the one getting in trouble. Now suddenly the rules matter. And now suddenly other people's feelings are my problem. Okay. And that's sort of the core of where I'm coming from here, is that I think we've reached a point, and maybe we've always been there, where unfortunately somehow other people's feelings are our problem. Right. And again, this sort of exclusive, it's a very one-sided thing, and it only ever seems to apply to people like me, people like Kingsman, people like you, maybe, if you're listening to this. It only ever applies to the people who try to do the right thing, who try to do, something good, who try to stand up for themselves, where other people's feelings are our problem. Okay. If we try to say, hey, what you're doing isn't correct, it's not right, and I think it's going to cause a problem, and that upsets someone for whatever reason, even though we're correct and we went about it as politely and professionally as possible, we're the problem, okay? Because we hurt their feelings. We made them feel bad, and so we're the problem because we should have just let them destroy whatever they were about to destroy. We should have just let them blow up whatever server, or we should have just let them go on and do whatever crazy shit they were about to do, because it would have been better for us to not say anything, because then we wouldn't have offended them, because then we wouldn't have hurt their feelings, right? And while there is something to be said And it is important. I do believe in trying to be nice and respectful to a certain extent. The reality is the truth fucking hurts, right? Sometimes people need to hear the truth. And sometimes that truth hurts. And there's no way around it. You can't, there's no amount of sugar, there's no amount of sugar coating that can make an unpleasant truth palatable, right? That's just how it is, right? If I need to tell you, like, hey, look, someone you love and care about just died in a tragic accident, there's really no amount of anything I can say to dance around that to make it better or nicer. That information is going to hurt you, but you need to hear it, right? That's obviously sort of an extreme example, but I think it illustrates my case is that sometimes what people need to hear is just going to fucking hurt them. And there's no way around that. But unfortunately, our society is in a place where more often than not, the person delivering that news is seen as the guilty party. You're seen as the troublemaker, right? We really do like to shoot the messenger rather than handle the problem or take care of the cause of the problem, right? So I have two kind of personal examples from my real life to illustrate this. Back when I was in college, I was a writing tutor, and I worked with our grad students because I was a head writing tutor, and so I would work with our grad students who had their own positions of leadership. And at one point, a grad student came to me with a project or a paper she was working on, and she said, hey, I'd like to research how people of different ethnicities or racial groups learn differently or how they respond to different methods of tutoring or something like that. And I said, okay, sure. I'll take what you've given me and I'll try to implement it into what I'm doing. And I believe that it had me ask some questions, right? She wanted me to ask some questions to people while I was tutoring them. And so I sat down with this black girl, and I was doing my tutoring, and I started asking these questions. And as I was doing so, I came to this realization of like, wow, these questions sound bad, right? These questions sound pretty racist, right? And so I stopped and I collected my thoughts on this, and then I thought more about it. And I think I even did my own research on this a little bit, not extensively. And I typed up an email, and I wasn't being accusatory. I wasn't trying to throw her under the bus. I didn't send this to her boss. I sent her an email. And I said, hey, look, I thought about this. I have some feedback. You might want to think about this. You might want to consider these things, okay? And the next thing I knew, I was being called into the office of our director, who was our interim director, by the way, not our real director. If our real director was there, I think this would have gone down very differently. But our interim director was there. And he said to me, hey, look, she came to me, she was crying. She really didn't like what you had to say. She really didn't appreciate your feedback. I'm going to need you to step down as head tutor unless you offer her an apology. And I said, what? Are you fucking kidding me? So I said, no, I don't think so. That's not how this is going to go down. So I did not offer her an apology because I hadn't done anything wrong. The email was, it was an email. Everyone could look at it. Everyone could review it. I showed it to people. I told people about the situation. I ended up telling our real director about the situation. She definitely didn't see it the way that, this interim director and this grown woman, this grad student who was older than me at the time, no one else seemed to see it the way that they did. And yet somehow this guy tried to effectively remove me from a position that I had and that I did well in and that I had earned because, one overly emotional and I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not overly intelligent woman reacted poorly to some pretty light, well-intentioned criticism about her probably well-intentioned project, right? I that was a pretty core memory for me in college, and I had some pretty interesting experiences in college. And even more recently, I had sort of a small altercation at work. I'm well respected at work. My supervisors and everything appreciate me. But I am a little bit infamous for being blunt and abrasive. I do have a history of this, as is probably obvious from my videos and is probably obvious from the way that I speak. But, every now and then it becomes a small issue. And so there's a bit of an issue at work with truck drivers and deliveries that I've been sort of sounding the alarm about for the last 5 years, or more or less, the time that I've been there. And it's never been resolved, this issue of like, we're not quite getting what we ordered, okay? And I've been, again, sounding the alarm about this for 5 years, trying to get people to resolve this, because there's a whole bunch of different people involved in this. And I'm just kind of on the receiving end of it, right? Literally. And I keep taking this to people, and it never gets resolved. And I've dealt with it for years without issue, okay? But recently, I had a bit of a heated conversation with the truck driver over this, because he pushed back pretty aggressively against what I had to say, even though I tried to make it very clear, like, look, I'm not blaming you. I understand this is not your fault. I have nothing against you. I'm just asking you to do this for me, and if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But yeah, yada, 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 okay? But he was, in my opinion, I thought he was a little hostile, okay? And so we got into it, right? Come to find out, they also thought, he and his dispatcher thought I was a little hostile as well, okay? Now, nobody really thinks this was that big of a deal, including, me and my bosses. But it was something that came up as, hey, this is another one of these cases, another one of these examples of, you're not always the most professional. And I sort of took offense to that notion, because if I've been dealing with this for 5 years, and I've dealt with this hundreds of times, and one time it goes south, I think it's a bit odd to try and criticize me as the problem in that situation, right? And my boss said something that I liked on this topic when I was talking to him about it. He said, well, they probably only told us half the story, right? They're selling us the half of the story that makes you sound worse and makes them sound better. And I really appreciated that he not only said that, but understood that, because that's definitely the case. And sure, I may be doing the same thing. Maybe I'm selling it the same way. But, I really don't think that I am personally. But hey, take that with a grain of salt. But I find it odd that I've been sounding the alarm bell about this for 5 years, trying to get something resolved, trying to get all these other people who aren't doing anything to solve this problem, trying to get it solved. And it seems perfectly acceptable that it's not solved for 5 years. And then suddenly, when one time there's an incident involving me, I'm suddenly the problem, right? Suddenly I'm the issue. Even though the only reason that we're even having this conversation, we're even having this altercation, is because the problem I've been pointing out and trying to get fixed for 5 years still hasn't been fixed, and nobody cares to fix it after 5 years. That doesn't seem quite right or equitable to me, right? If anyone in the last 5 years had just cared to fix the thing that I've been talking about for 5 years, then we wouldn't have even gotten here. This never would have happened, right? How are we bringing this around to me? And this seems to me like another perfect situation here. Another perfect example of this situation. Now, it's not an exact one for one, but there's all kinds of examples like this where people point things out about an obvious problem that goes ignored, unresolved, or even aggravated. And then suddenly, when that problem blows up, when that problem that is ignored or left unchecked turns into a bigger issue, or an issue that catches the attention of the wrong person, only now, only then, only suddenly does anyone actually give a shit, right? That seems odd. That doesn't seem like the ideal way to handle a problem. And so turning this back around to Marvel Rivals, I hope that this entire situation sort of catches the attention of NetEase themselves, because I think it rightfully should. The fact that Black Widow is seen as a character that you pick when you're throwing, and that anytime you pick Black Widow, you are seen as inherently throwing, and the fact that you almost can't play her without sabotaging your team, it's almost impossible to do it, that by itself is a problem, right? And the fact that the community is so openly toxic, right? That this could happen at the highest level of play during a live broadcast of a public tournament for money. Money was on the line, and people acted like this was a fucking quick play lobby. All of these things point to some very serious issues in Marvel Rivals that have basically gone ignored for 6 seasons now, right? Because NetEase doesn't care to fix them. They really just genuinely don't seem to care, or they don't seem able to resolve them. And I hope that this situation sort of kicks them in the ass and inspires them to do something about it, because I mean, I feel like there's some problems here. This didn't just come out of nowhere. This isn't new. Like I said, this happens at every level of play, and it only happened as a result of the toxicity in the community combined with the frankly terrible balancing in the game that resulted in a character who someone wanted to play being virtually unplayable. And if you want to get into it, and if you want to criticize this aspect of the game design, the fact that the game is so counterpick heavy. If someone plays a character, you have to counterpick them. It's almost impossible to play the game otherwise, unless the skill differential is just that big. And at this level of play, you're not going to find that skill differential. So you have to counterpick. That's the only means of playing and winning, is to counterpick. And I'm not sure that that's the healthiest way to design a team-based hero shooter designed around some of those popular characters in the world. So what does this say about society or like the gaming community at large? I think it says a lot, you know. Another thing I've wanted to talk about in this channel a lot, but I never quite found the right avenue, and it was sort of a tired topic and still is sort of the ego problem in the gaming community, and specifically in the Souls community. I'm a Souls player. You know, I've loved Souls since I got into Dark Souls, okay? And I have the classic story of, you know, I played Dark Souls 1 on Xbox in college, and I went to the graveyard, and I got my ass kicked, and I didn't know what poise was, and I thought the game was shit. And then I came back to it, I learned, I got good, and then I became a lifelong Souls fan. I got the classic story, okay? And I've played every Souls game since. I went back, I played Demon Souls, you know. Love Bloodborne. I got that shit running on my PC. Is glorious from software. Sony, what the fuck are you doing? Where's the PC port? But, you know, with Elden Ring, something's different. I personally do feel like Elden Ring has not only crossed the threshold, but I think the way Elden Ring is designed is not good. And I won't go too deep into this, but I'll say that I don't think Elden Ring is well designed, and I think that its difficulty is too much. And I think it's too much in a specific way that is unfun, okay? And that's a controversial thing to say, but there's been a lot of discourse on that. And the problem is that so many people have tied their self-worth and their ego and their pride into their ability to be good at Souls games. And for them, basically the mark of pride is being good at a Souls game, okay? And they judge everything by that. And I think that that has started to fester out into the greater community. This topic, this phrase of skill issue, of get good, it's become a serious problem. Because now everything is about, quote unquote, skill expression. Everything is about being the best. Everything is about having high numbers, about having high stats, about being the best at these, you know, these pretend video games, to the point where people have genuinely stopped caring about things like winning or teamwork or even fucking fun. I'm sure some people have fun with sort of the masochistic challenge runs and things that they do in some of these games. But I think for a lot of people, it's not even about that. It really is just about the sense of pride they get at the end. Even if it's not fun getting there, they just want the accomplishment. They just want to be able to say that they did it, and they just want to have like that trophy, right? That digital trophy, okay? And Marvel Rivals is the same way. People don't genuinely care about winning the game. They just care about being the best DPS. They want to be the best Spider-Man in the lobby. They want to be the best Black Widow, the best Hawkeye, the best Hela. They don't care about having good tanks. They don't care about being the tank. They don't care about being the support. They don't care about enabling their team. They don't care about supporting their team. They just want to be the MVP with the biggest numbers at the end of the match. And that mentality is a large part of the problem with Marvel Rivals, and was one of the core issues in this controversy where this person, this woman, for whatever reason, she was not able to let go of her pride or her ego, or maybe she genuinely has never picked up any character other than Widow, which is kind of sad by itself, right? Because a lot of these one-trick players, these DPS-only players, literally can't bring themselves, and I've met these people in this Discord server, and I refuse to talk to these people. They disgust me. These people who genuinely think that playing tank or playing support is fucking beneath them in some way, okay? These people only want to play DPS because they think that's the only way to add value to a team. And that's such a fucked up way of looking at this, when playing tank, playing support is intended to be, 1/3 of your team on each side. And those are incredibly important roles. And can each be playmaking roles in themselves, right? It's not as if Doctor Strange literally just stands there and holds his shield up all day. And it's not as if Invisible Woman or Cloak and Dagger literally just sits there and heals all day. But part of the problem too is there's a perception that that is what happens. There's these DPS players who never play these other roles, and they genuinely think that's all that people do, and so they don't respect these players. They don't understand the struggle of being a tank, or they don't understand the struggle of being a support, because they genuinely don't think there's any skill. They don't think there's any difficulty in doing it. And there's people who pick up support, or people who pick up tank, think that it's that simple, think it's that easy, and then when it's not, when they play support and they sit on point while their team pushes forward because they have an opportunity, they have a chance to, ace the enemy team, to wipe them out, and then they get wiped instead because the tanks and the DPS are expecting the healers to push with them in this successful push, but the healers just fucking sitting back on point, twiddling their fucking thumbs up their ass because they're like, oh, I'm a healer, I just sit back on support. Where are you guys going? You left line of sight, right? That's the problem. Is that people don't flex. People don't know how to play the fucking game. Because you've got these DPS players with the egos, and you've got these other players, maybe they're flexing, or maybe they're just, maybe they're just not very good at the game, they don't know how to play, right? And regardless of who plays how good or whatever, at the end of every match, people start looking at that scoreboard, and they start talking shit, and they start throwing blame every which way, saying, wow, look at my stats. Look at how good I did. I did all this work because I got all these kills. I got all these final hits. And you guys didn't do anything. Or alternatively, they'll say, look at all these heals I got. I healed you guys so much and you didn't do anything, right? What did all my heals amount to? Or they'll say all kinds of out-of-pocket shit as if these stats mean anything. When reality is, the stats on the leaderboard mean very little. Especially in a vacuum. People have some very two-dimensional thinking about the stats on a Marvel Rivals scoreboard. And the truth is that the stats don't necessarily mean anything. I'm going to go out on a limb and say most of the best games of Marvel Rivals are games where your healers have like 12 to 15,000 healing. Because the reality is that you only need healing. You can only get healing if you take damage. And you can only take damage if your tanks aren't doing their job, okay? But if you have tanks that are doing their job, then you're not taking damage. You're not taking a lot of damage. And you're not going to take a lot of damage if your tanks are doing your job, creating space, giving you opportunity, using their shields, absorbing damage for themselves. And if your DPS are taking advantage of that space and getting picks. But when you have 50,000 healing, what that means is, usually, it means your team isn't doing shit. It means you're feeding. It means you're giving ult charge. It means you're getting into these fights and you're dragging these fights out. But neither side is really doing that much. Or maybe you're just heal botting the tank. Like, oh, okay, sure. Maybe, you're healing your tank a lot. Your tank is taking a lot of hits and you're healing the tank a lot. But all your DPS are going completely unsupported because you don't even care to look at them because you're just healing the tank, right? People are always quick to throw blame around. And people really never think about these things in a three-dimensional way. So just, again, another example. When I was on my DPS villain arc to get out of Platinum, because I tried playing as a team with people in the Discord, and it didn't work because people are awful at this game. So I decided, fuck it, I'm going to play DPS. There was one match where somebody picked Hela. And I said, all right, cool. I'm gonna play Namor. I don't normally play Namor, but like Namor's not that hard. I can play Namor. And so I just picked Namor to enable the Hela and her broken team up. And it turns out this Hela was really good. This was a really good Hela. And so we no diff the enemy team, right? The Hela just cleared through these people. And at the end of the match, I said, my villain arc is going well. And I think it was someone on my team who says the Namor with like 4 final hits. Because I didn't get a lot of final hits that match, right? But I said, I was really just playing to support the Hela, because the Hela had like 15, 20 final hits. She tore everybody apart. So first of all, I didn't need to get a lot of final hits. The match didn't last that long because we no-diffed them. And second of all, there were only so many kills to go around. The Hela took all of them. So first of all. Second of all, final hits are not the only thing that matters. I was doing my job as a Namor, keeping out all of these enemy units. When the Thing tried to push us, or when a Spider-Man or whatever tried to flank us, my turrets were there. My turret, my trident, my slow. I was there shutting these fuckers down every time they tried to get in and attack that Hela or attack our back line. I was doing my job. I might not have gotten the final kill, but it's not as if that's the only thing that mattered. So I just found it interesting that like a member of my own team, after we no-diffed the enemy, felt the need to make a comment like that. Now, look, I'm not, it's not like I'm super upset about it. I wouldn't even necessarily consider that a toxic comment. But that's how people think about this game, where they can't process being like there to support people or to enable people or just to, make your other teammates succeed, right? That's not how they see this game, okay? Again, similarly, if you play like an aggressive healer or something like that, like I play a lot of Cloak and Dagger, that gets a lot of mixed reactions from people, okay? If I'm playing Cloak and Dagger and I see an opportunity to kill somebody, I'm going to take it. And sometimes that gets me heat because people will say, I died while our fucking Cloak and Dagger was killing somebody. And in some cases, sure, maybe that's true. Maybe I could have been healing that person. But in a lot more cases, I was taking the opportunity to secure a kill that nobody else was going to secure. And I considered that more valuable. And the result is that I'll get games where people accuse me of smurfing as Cloak and Dagger because I'm running the lobby as Cloak and Dagger because Cloak and Dagger can do that, right? That's how that works. But people, again, don't see it that way because they see healers as support bots. They see them as heal bots. Like, what do you mean you're pushing forward as Cloak and Dagger? What the fuck are you doing? Why are you? What is this? Why is the Cloak and Dagger at the front of the? They don't understand it, right? I think there's also sort of an elephant in the room in this topic to discuss, which is that, following this, the fact that there were multiple women at fault here and sort of antagonizing and aggravating the situation, it has resulted in some generalized misogyny coming out and people responding to this. And, that's usually the case in most things, is that anytime like a group of people is involved in something, there's always going to be a vocal minority of people who come out and say, and that's why all minority group is bad, right? I mean, it happens all the time. It's not really a shock. But now, obviously, it's happening in this community, in the gaming community, with people saying, oh, see, that's why women shouldn't play Marvel Rivals. That's why women shouldn't play games. And obviously, this is a ridiculous sort of generalization to make. You can't extrapolate one or two people's actions and apply that to an entire community. That's obviously not fair. But I think it is worth noting that, some of these women, I don't know all the details, but some of them did themselves try to hide behind these kind of accusations as a defense for their own actions, even though they were clearly in the wrong. And even though it's on literally caught in 4K, that they were being, antagonistic and openly hostile and saying all kinds of horrible things to this guy, they immediately tried to jump to and hide behind excuses of misogyny, even before anyone had really said anything about them or to them. They immediately tried to hide behind that defense. And I think that that's pretty despicable behavior, right? And I think that happens a lot, this sort of deflection from criticism that happens a lot sort of preemptively and also in response to genuine criticism. This noise gets added into the discussion a lot. This comes up with, movies, when movies are reviewed poorly, or games when they're reviewed poorly, if those movies and games have diverse leads or sort of elements that push diversity or diverse messaging. There will be a lot of, sure, there will be a lot of bad faith criticism, and there'll be a lot of vocal minority just spewing hate and misogyny and you know, racism and things like that. But at the same time, there will be a lot of genuine constructive criticism. And then the people who made a bad product or people who made bad decisions, people who were actively the aggressor in a situation will say, all of the criticism is invalid because I am a minority and everyone criticizing me is a racist, a sexist, a misogynist, whatever, right? That's not acceptable, right? That's pretty shitty, okay? It doesn't really need to be said that being a racist is bad. I think that's pretty self-apparent. But I think what needs to be called out more is that kind of behavior. And that sort of brings me to sort of the next point here. I don't believe in like children being bullied. I think that it's obviously awful when children are bullied. And I think we should do everything in our power to stop that. But I believe hard in bullying adults, okay? I think adults should be shamed and bullied and raked over the coals, okay? When you're an adult and you do some shit like this, you act the way these people acted on live TV or TV, on like live broadcasts, right? That's unacceptable. And too often, especially today, especially due to our current leadership, unfortunately, this kind of behavior has become acceptable and normalized, and people really don't even have shame anymore. You know, they'll act these ways and they won't ever really face repercussions about it because it's considered almost normal. Coming back to what I said earlier, it's considered more normal and more socially acceptable in many cases to act the way these aggressive, hostile women acted than for Kingsman to act the way that he did, which was saying, hey, fucking wake up, you know, play right, you know. And I think that we should do more to shame people when they act out of line. Now, I'm not saying that we should DDoS people. I'm not saying we should send them death threats or crazy shit like that. But like when people act out and when people do something like this, they need to be called out on it, right? The current public shaming that's happening for these people all involved, I'm okay with it. I think it's good because hopefully they learn a lesson from it and hopefully other people learn a lesson from it. Now, am I optimistic that a lesson will be learned from it? No, not really. Because, and I guess I'll make this the final point. I think the core issue here, what we're really learning from all of this is that people really lack self-reflection and the ability to look inwards. Anytime that there's a problem or anytime something goes wrong, people's immediate defense mechanism is to jump to an externalized response. They need to externalize blame and find a person, a thing, a party responsible, right? If something goes wrong in their life, at their job, in their video games, it can't possibly be their fault. If they lose a match of Marvel Rivals and they do badly as Spider-Man, it can't possibly be because their skills as Spider-Man aren't cutting it or because they chose a bad character for that matchup or because of any other factors, right? It has to be someone's fault, right? That's the core problem. And I think if you look at our American politics, if you look at basically anything, you'll understand that this is the core problem. Everything has to be someone's fault. And if you can find someone to blame, if you can give people who have problems a person or a thing to blame for those problems, you're going to find a lot of success because it's easy to do it, right? Because at that point, when there is really no one to blame other than themselves, you can make something up. And as long as you can sell that convincingly, people will happily eat that up. And they'll happily believe, oh, the problem isn't that this one person was toxic as a result of this, you know, these many decisions that NetEase and the gaming community and this whole, you know, long list of things that have gone wrong in gaming over the last 20 years. It's not that. It's that women are bad, right? That's the conclusion. Blame women for what happened. Or they'll blame, again, They'll blame their teammates, they'll blame the enemies, they'll blame literally anything and everything other than themselves. If something goes wrong in the game, if something goes wrong in their personal life, it can't be because they lack communication skills. It can't be because of any of that. It's because of someone else. Someone sabotaged them, because the Mexicans are taking their jobs, because, the fucking liberals, because the woke, because whatever. It's always somebody's fault, And it just annoys me when people try to put me in that position, when people try to blame me for their problems. And I think ultimately Kingsman was in this position where he did everything right. He did everything he could to try and come out on top. And these people who lacked self-reflection, who were filled with toxicity, who couldn't get past their own egos, couldn't realize that the problem was them and that they just needed to make some adjustments. And so they needed someone to blame. And he, speaking out, trying to do the right thing, made himself an easy target. Okay? Now, thankfully for him, the court of public opinion on the internet made justice happen, and ultimately he came out on top of this situation. But the unfortunate reality is that for people like me, and again, maybe for people like you, maybe for many of thousands of more people in the world, we don't have the court of public opinion all the time. We're doing our best. We are usually correct. And we're trying to do the right thing. And we just get shit on. Because for every person out there who is a Kingsman or is trying to do the right thing, there's 10, 20, or 100 people like, CC or Zaza or any of these other people on that team who are head fully up their own ass, need to find somebody to blame, and they're going to blame Kingsman. They're going to blame me. They're going to blame you. They're going to blame us, right? And that genuinely upsets me, okay? Because if we could find the answer to that problem, I think the world could be a lot better a place. So as an addendum to the video, I want to make sort of an acknowledgement about the maybe irony of the video, because I have some level of self-awareness, right? I'm sitting here complaining about people who have an ego and have their heads up their asses, and simultaneously I'm preaching as just a given fact that I am correct, I am right, I am in the right, and people like me. And I want to start by saying I don't think that I'm always right, but more than often I am right, And I think this is something that also makes people uncomfortable, is this idea that there are some people that just are more qualified, are more correct, have it more figured out, okay? And this is not some kind of divine mandate. It's not some kind of fucking genetic predisposition. It's kind of a case-by-case basis, and it kind of depends on what you're talking about, right? Like, if you need a medical opinion, you're probably going to go to a doctor, okay? But at the same time, just because somebody has a PhD and has a doctorate in a particular subject doesn't mean that they are actually qualified to speak on basically anything else. In fact, if they have a PhD or a doctorate in an incredibly niche, specific area of medical science, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're not very intelligent or smart about anything else because they've devoted 10 years of their life studying one particular field. They probably don't have time to learn or to think much about anything else, okay? So just because they're qualified in one area doesn't make them more qualified in another area. But they are probably extremely qualified in that one area that they are qualified to speak in. And so their opinion should carry a lot more weight than others, right? Everyone is entitled to an opinion. We can agree on that. But not everybody's opinion carries equal weight. And not everybody's opinion carries equal weight all the time in all the same areas, okay? And my personal observations from my life is that I'm just kind of above average in a lot of ways, okay? Especially when it comes to thinking about things, observing things, making conclusions about things. I'm just above average. I'm correct more often than I'm not. And uniquely, and this is the hard part, okay, because I don't think being intelligent or being smart, I don't think these are hard, and I don't think that they're things that you can't, choose. I think every day people wake up and they choose to be either smart or not. A lot of people just wake up and choose to be stupid, frankly. But, I try my best to wake up and be smart and make good decisions, okay? But I don't think that's the hard part. We all have a supercomputer in our pocket. The hard part is when you're wrong, acknowledging that you're wrong and making the necessary corrections, okay? So when I am wrong, because I am human, it does happen, I'm not perfect. I try to fix that. I try to look into, okay, well, why was I wrong? What was the problem? And how can I be better? So when I say that I'm correct or I'm doing the right thing, frankly, it's because I am right. And if I'm wrong, I fix it. I change my opinion. I learn what I need to, and then I'm quickly right again. Being wrong for me is a temporary state of being. And frankly, that should be the case for most people. But a lot of people kind of take pride in being wrong. A lot of people are just so set in their ways. And this is where the ego and the lack of self reflection comes in, that when they're wrong, they can't see it, they can't acknowledge it, and they can't process it and overcome it. They're just wrong, and they are okay being wrong, or they're not willing to admit that they're wrong, and that prevents them from ever being right in the future. I don't really have that problem, generally speaking. I'm sure I have some flaws and shortcomings, but for the most part, I don't really have that problem. And I think that there's a lot of people out there like me, but unfortunately, we get drowned out by the masses and the majority, which are the people that don't have these skills. So I wanted to acknowledge that potential irony here of me talking in absolute facts about this, but it's just how it is. And I think that idea, me saying these things, can offend some people. But I mean, look, if you are offended by me saying that I'm smarter than most people, I'm not saying I'm smarter than any one specific person. I'm not saying I'm smarter than you necessarily. But if you're offended by the idea that I'm smarter than the average person, if you think that I am talking about you, prove me wrong, okay? Be smarter than me. Make that your goal, right? It's a choice. You can be as smart as you want to be. If you are offended at the idea of there being people who are smarter than you, fix it. Do something about it, right? It's not just fix it, right? It's really not a personal attack. It's just the way it is. Don't take offense to it. And if you are upset about it, be better and be part of the group that is smarter. This is statistics. There's people who are above average and there's people who are below average, right? Which group are you a part of? Because you have to be part of one of the groups. You have to be. But everybody thinks they're an above average driver. But statistically, that's not possible, okay? The difference is I've got receipts, I've got evidence. If you have a problem with that, fine, I'll show you my evidence. You show me yours.